She cheated 500 times. One day I got my revenge. Wife's betrayal stories, Reddit betrayal story. My wife cheated on me 500 times. One day I decided enough was enough. You won't believe what happened next. I always considered myself a lucky man for having a woman by my side whom I loved more than anything in the world. Our marriage seemed perfect to me. At least that's what I thought, until one day I saw something that made me question everything. It was an ordinary evening. We were sitting at home watching TV when I accidentally noticed a message pop up on her phone. She quickly closed it, but I managed to catch a glimpse of an unfamiliar name. It seemed odd, but I decided not to think much of it. However, the suspicion had already taken root in my mind, and I couldn't shake it off. The next day, when she went to work, I decided to check her phone. This was a moment I feared, but I couldn't bear the uncertainty any longer. Her messages were full of conversations with different men where she flirted, arranged meetings, and even sent them her photos. Each message felt like a knife to my heart. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was this really happening to me? My wife, with whom I had spent so many years, was cheating on me with different men. Just realizing this made me tremble, but it was only the beginning. After going through all her messages, I could no longer look at her the same way. Everything that once mattered to me had lost its meaning. Every move she made seemed suspicious, every word a lie. I started monitoring her, checking her social media, searching for more evidence of her betrayal. The more I looked, the more signs I found. She wasn't just flirting, she was actually meeting these other men. It wasn't a coincidence or a one-time mistake. It was systematic, without any guilt. One day, I dared to follow her when she said she was meeting a friend. I was sure she was lying again, but seeing it with my own eyes was even more painful. I trailed her to a restaurant where she met a man I had never seen before. They sat at a table, laughing and hugging. I couldn't believe it was happening. My world was falling apart, and I had no idea how to cope. After that evening, I could no longer sleep peacefully. Thoughts of her betrayals kept spinning in my head, and I started losing control. I wanted to confront her, to force her to confess, but I knew a simple conversation wouldn't be enough. I wanted her to feel the same pain I was feeling, but I realized this was only the beginning. I didn't know exactly how I would get my revenge, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't get away with it easily. I continued gathering evidence. Every step she took was under surveillance. Every word she said was under suspicion. I decided to record all her conversations and save all her messages. It was hard for me to do this, but enduring it any longer was even harder. I could no longer be the man who believed in her innocence. I needed to know just how far her betrayals had gone. Every day, I found more and more evidence. Her connections with other men weren't just short-term flings. They were long-term relationships. She had been meeting them for years, lying to my face while I remained clueless. My love for her began turning into hatred. I no longer saw the woman I once loved. I only saw a liar who had betrayed my trust. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I decided it was time to take action. I needed to come up with a plan that would make her feel the same pain I did. But I knew this plan had to be meticulously thought out. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. I was preparing for the moment when I could exact my revenge, and already knew I wouldn't stop until I saw her suffer the way I had. Next, I started tracking her schedule, monitoring all her meetings. Every time she said she was going to work or meeting a friend, I knew it was just a cover. She was a master at manipulating me, but now was one step ahead. I collected all the evidence, planning when and where to strike. I didn't just want to reveal her betrayal. I wanted something much more. I wanted her to realize that betraying me was the biggest mistake of her life. In the evenings, while she slept, I reviewed all the evidence I had gathered, analyzing every detail. My life had turned into one big operation to expose her. Anger consumed me, but I held it back, waiting for the right moment. I knew that moment would come, and I had to be ready to strike when she least expected it. One day, when she went out to another one of her meetings, I decided the time had come. I was ready to expose her in front of everyone, to make her feel the same shame and pain I had felt all those months. I couldn't wait any longer. My revenge was nearing, and I wasn't going to stop. From time to time, I started doubting whether I was doing the right thing. but then I'd remember all the painful moments I had endured because of her betrayals. This strengthened my resolve and pushed me forward. I knew this game wasn't over, and I would be the one to put an end to our story. I planned everything so that I could give her the biggest surprise of her life. She couldn't even imagine that I knew about all her betrayals. I prepared for this day with special care. I knew that when the moment arrived, she would never be able to forget how she destroyed everything we had. And then when the day finally came, I was ready to expose her in front of everyone. My revenge was near, and I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she realized I knew everything. But this was just the beginning. What I had planned to change our lives forever. I couldn't just walk away. Every time I remembered her betrayals, a wave of hatred grew inside me. My decision was made. I would make her feel the same pain she had inflicted on me. I needed a plan, and not just any plan, but something perfect, meticulously thought out. I began gathering evidence of her infidelities. Every time she lied, I took note. Every message, every phone call, everything became part of my collection. It was important not to rush. I couldn't allow her to suspect anything. All my actions had to be invisible. My goal was clear: to destroy her life the way she had destroyed mine. Every day I built my wall of evidence, and with each passing day, my heart grew colder. I learned to control my rage, keeping it buried deep inside like a bomb I planned to detonate at the right moment. Besides gathering evidence, I also developed a financial plan. I couldn't afford to lose everything in the divorce process. I prepared documents, transferred assets, and consulted with a lawyer. My goal was to secure my financial stability after I gave her this hellish surprise. Every detail mattered. There was no room for mistakes. My actions became a kind of therapy for me. Instead of losing control, I focused on my plan. Every element had to be flawless. My revenge would be so painful that she would never be able to forget it. I saw her every day, looked at her, and my heart tightened with hatred, but my face remained calm. She had no idea what I was preparing for her. Time passed, and I was closer to finishing my preparations. My resolve never wavered for a moment. My plan was my only goal. I did everything possible to protect myself legally so that when the truth came out, I would be ready for anything. Each day gave me new strength, and every step brought me closer to the moment when I could break her life the way she broke mine. Finally, when all the pieces of the puzzle were in place, I began preparing for the final blow. I carefully planned how and where to reveal the whole truth to her. This wouldn't be just an exposure, it would be total destruction. The moment she realizes she has lost everything will be my victory. I felt the tension building, but I didn't rush. Each day of her happiness brought me closer to the moment when everything would be shattered. Now, all that was left was to wait. I was ready. My soul was focused on one thing: revenge. She had no clue that the life she had so carefully built would soon collapse. I saw her every day, watched as she continued living her life unaware of anything. But soon, everything will change. And when that moment comes, she will feel the same pain that I went through. When she went out for yet another business meeting, I decided to follow her and make her feel the pain because I knew what awaited me. She arrived at the Breakfast Cafe, where we had dined together many times. Instead of meeting with a business partner and solving work-related issues, I saw a reunion of old lovers who had no idea someone was watching them. I called her and told her everything I was witnessing, all those business hugs and flirtations between my wife and her lover, the kisses. After I hung up, I felt cold sweat on my back. I watched as her face changed from smugness to panic. With each passing minute, she sank deeper into despair, and that gave me strength. I could tell she was feeling her illusions begin to shatter, and I liked it. When I got home, I heard sounds from my phone. She was trying to call me, but I ignored the calls. I felt like a director staging his play on the stage. I knew my actions would provoke a reaction, and that was part of my plan. After speaking with her, I checked my documents again. I had all the information about her betrayals compiled into one database. I had evidence that I could use at any moment. I couldn't let anything go wrong. My calm, cold-blooded attitude toward the situation was just part of the bigger game I was playing. The next day, I saw how nervous she looked, trying to act as if nothing had happened. Her attempts to hide her fear were laughable, and at the same time a clear demonstration of her weakness. She tried to appear confident and unshakable, but I could see through her mask. I began planning my next move. I decided that the greatest impact would come if I revealed all the details of her betrayals, not just to her, but to our entire circle. I started preparing the materials for the big premiere, everything needed to expose her in all her horrifying glory. I decided that this would be the most painful for her because everyone she loved or interacted with would witness her downfall. Every time I faced her attempts to understand what had happened, I remained indifferent and cold. I waited for her to make a mistake that would allow me to complete my plan. I continued observing her reactions, noting any signs of anxiety that could become part of my grand finale. She continued trying to restore normalcy, but I could see how her life was beginning to crumble. My plans were taking shape, and I could already feel how each step was bringing me closer to the final scene. I knew the time for the big reveal was approaching, and I was ready for it. One day, I decided to test how she would react to a public scandal. I set up a small intrigue. I left flyers confirming her infidelities in visible spots around our neighborhood. I watched as the neighbors started discussing them among themselves and saw her face turn red with anger and despair. It was the perfect confirmation that my plans were working. At that moment, I felt how my patience and planning were finally bearing fruit. I held all the strings needed to make her experience the pain she had caused me. My patience became my greatest ally, and I knew everything was going according to plan. In the end, I prepared for the grand finale. All that was left was to find the perfect moment to release all the evidence and begin the final attack. I couldn't wait to see her go through her own disaster. My soul had no room left for forgiveness, only for the final blow. I organized the party not just for fun. It was my big moment. All close friends, relatives, and acquaintances were invited, and I could already picture how their faces would change when I revealed the truth. I knew this would be a moment of truth, and I couldn't afford to make a mistake. When everyone gathered, I decided to start with a speech. Standing before the audience, I watched as they gathered near the stage. I noticed how they eagerly awaited each word, and it thrilled me. I paused to set the right tone and began telling my story. My words flowed from the heart, and I felt how each paragraph caused shock and astonishment among the listeners. I spoke about how my wife cheated on me with 5 different people. In each paragraph, I detailed my feelings, my suffering, and how I discovered her infidelities. I laid bare all the emotions I had experienced, and it undoubtedly caused pain to everyone who listened. Displaying the evidence, I watched as shock appeared on people's faces. All the text messages, photos, and conversations I had gathered were projected on the screen. I saw guests exchanging glances that spoke of their shock and outrage. My wife tried to intervene, but I knew her voice no longer held any weight. She looked devastated and helpless, trying to find support among the guests, but was powerless against what was happening. Her attempts to justify herself sounded like nothing more than desperate attempts to escape the reality crashing down on her. I watched as her support crumbled before my eyes. It was hard not to feel satisfaction knowing my actions truly had an impact. I realized that my revenge not only destroyed her reputation, but also brought me a bitter yet satisfying sense of justice. By the time the party ended, I felt mixed emotions. The joy of my revenge succeeding was intertwined with the bitterness of realizing that all of this happened because of my own suffering. My goal was achieved, but was I truly happy? That question remained unanswered, but one thing was clear. I had achieved what I sought, and now all that remained was to pick up the pieces of my life and see what would come next. As the party drew to a close, I began to notice how the crowd around me thinned. My wife, now on the verge of a nervous breakdown, tried to find a way out of the situation. In her eyes, I saw panic and despair, which only deepened my sense of victory. I decided I needed to deliver one final blow. Stepping down from the stage, I approached her and handed over the final documents, the notes and audio recordings I had kept. I watched her face pale with each new piece of information she received. The thought that this was just justified payback wouldn't leave my mind, considering the pain she had caused me. She tried talking about the possibility of atoning for her actions, but every argument she made seemed pointless. and empty in this situation. In her eyes, I saw the realization that there was no turning back for her. It even shocked me a little. I didn't expect her reaction to be so severe. I thought she might try to find a path to reconciliation, but all I saw was deep despair. My friends and relatives who had previously supported me were so shocked they began discussing it among themselves. Their conversations and reactions reinforced my sense of justice. I heard some of them express how unforgivable my wife's betrayal was, and how many people were surprised that I managed to gather all this evidence. My plan worked, and I felt it in every word and every look I received from those around me. At the same time, there was a certain sense of disappointment. I had achieved my goal, but I felt empty inside. My revenge was complete, but it didn't bring me true peace. After the party, I was left alone with my thoughts about what comes next. I needed to piece my life back together and decide how to move forward. I understood that even though my revenge was carried out, my soul remained in turmoil. It was a strange feeling. Achieving the goal brought not only joy, but also deep psychological pressure. I returned home, where everything remained unchanged. The old life was gone, and I knew it was time to find a new path. I made the decision that it was time to start a new chapter, leaving all these tumultuous events behind. I realized that now my life required not just restoration, but also a reevaluation of all my values and priorities. I still had many questions to answer. How to live on, how to find new meaning, and how to avoid repeating past mistakes. These were questions I would have to find answers to on my own. When the party ended and all the guests had gone, I was left alone with a void that once seemed impossible. I had been waiting for the relief that I thought would come with the completion of my revenge plan. But instead of feeling joy and liberation, I found myself in the embrace of deep disappointment and sorrow. The sense of victory I once imagined now seemed distant and unnecessary. My thoughts began to revolve around the fact that I had lost not only my wife, but also a part of myself. It seemed that revenge had taken more than I could have ever imagined. I scrutinized every detail of my life before and after this event, and all my achievements that once seemed significant now felt empty and meaningless. I sat in the silence of my apartment, which now seemed even more vacant than before. Every corner reminded me of what had been before and after this event. It felt like all the memories that once brought me joy had turned into bitter, nostalgic pain. I began reevaluating my feelings and motivations. I recalled how I believed that revenge would make me feel justice and bring me happiness. But in reality, I felt that it had only deepened my emptiness. The revenge I had so meticulously planned now seemed like just another part of the great pain I was dealing with. The sense of victory I once envisioned as the ultimate goal had dissolved into bitterness and sadness. I began to understand that I had not only destroyed my wife's life, but also my own. My decision to seek revenge seemed so cruel and heartless that I could not help but reflect on how much I had lost because of it. As I approached conclusions, I realized I needed change. My old life no longer existed, and I needed it to find new meaning and a new path. I began considering the possibility of seeking help, knowing that coping with this alone would be extremely difficult. I felt that my emotions and state required professional intervention, and that was one of the first steps I decided to take. My story of revenge ended not as I had expected. Instead of finding peace and joy, I received a lesson that true satisfaction cannot be found in destroying others' lives. I needed to rethink everything I had done and find a way to move forward without carrying the pain I had been holding on to. I started thinking about how to rebuild my life, how to find myself again, and understand that true value lies not in revenge, but in the ability to move forward and find joy in simple things. It was a new path, and although it seemed difficult and convoluted, I knew it was the only way to true recovery. My revenge did not bring me what I had sought, but it opened new horizons for self-discovery and personal growth. I hope that this experience would allow me to become stronger and wiser, and also help me find a path to true happiness and fulfillment in life. After I carried out my plan, I expected to find some relief. At first, everything seemed under control. My revenge was complete and precise, but when the celebration ended and everyone had left, I was left alone with my thoughts. I felt a void inside me that was far worse than any pain I had felt before. All my resolve and determination suddenly began to wane. Every day after the party was a true test for me. I realized that my plan for revenge had not brought the desired satisfaction I had hoped for. Instead, I found that my actions led to even greater disappointment and dissatisfaction. I began to watch as my own life began to unravel, and it was hard to endure. The sense of victory turned into a bitterness I couldn't comprehend. I looked at my surroundings and saw the ruins left in the wake of my act of revenge. My wife had lost her reputation, and I had lost my own inner peace. I understood that I had not only destroyed her life, but also my own. The inner monster I had unleashed now refused to give me peace. I was overwhelmed with memories of how things could have been different. I began to question why I had chosen this path. Was revenge the true goal? Was it what I really wanted? My life, which once seemed clearly planned, had now become shapeless and confusing. I tried to find new meaning in everything that had happened. I visited a therapist, trying to find inner peace and come to terms with what had occurred. I had plenty of time for reflection, and I tried to rediscover myself in this chaos. It was a difficult path, full of doubts and fears about the future. Over time, I began to realize that true healing does not come from revenge or destroying another person. I understood that to find peace, I needed to look inward and accept my own mistakes. I worked on forgiving not only my wife, but also myself for allowing anger to take over. I started working on finding meaning in my life again. I engaged in volunteer work, trying to help others who were in similar situations. It became a way for me to find my place in the world and reconnect with people. I realized that the true value of life lies not in revenge, but in the ability to forgive and find new opportunities for happiness. My journey to healing was long and challenging, but I learned a lot about myself and the importance of seeking peace within. From now on, I strive to live with deep understanding and compassion for others, knowing that true strength lies in forgiveness and recovery, not in destruction. Thank you for reading my story. Great things start with small steps, and each of us can contribute to the fight for justice. Feel free to share your thoughts on this story from my life in the comments below.